All right.
What are you drinking tonight?
Green tea. You gotta activate that immune system. That's what my doctor told me.
And you listened to your doctor?
I did. This is the same doctor that I asked him, what's the deal with my male menopause hot flashes? And he said, I don't know what's going on there. So, why is it hard to talk about money?
That's such a good question, and it's one I don't know if I can answer or I want to answer.
Even this conversation, I'm interested to see where this goes. This might end in a fight.
I'm going to speak for me because I think it's awkward, or because I maybe don't know enough, or maybe I feel insecure with it.
Don't know, like feel like you don't have enough knowledge. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know maybe what your plan is with it, like our money, or
Yeah.
like, so it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can add to the conversation. Am I smart enough to add to the conversation? And so I feel awkward.
There you go. I think for me, why is it hard to talk about money with my spouse? Probably because I think it's going to bring conflict. It's going to bring an awkward conversation at least, because that's just kind of been my experience. And so this was something that we've been talking about for a little bit, but just this is one of those things that's it's hard to talk about as a couple. And what are the things to lean into as a couple? I think money is one of those things that can really drive a wedge. Of course, now that we're saying this and my phone's nearby, Mark Zuckerberg's going to hear and just send me all these money videos. And
It's so true, isn't it?
I haven't even told you this. Some guy started popping up on my Instagram, and I followed him. But his bit is he's a money guru, and he's going to help you, like, try to budget or something. But the people he works with is a husband and a wife, and all the videos I've seen is the wife is just an overspender. And so this guy is completely exasperated the entire time. He's like, what the bleep did you spend $3,000 on an Apple Card? It's like, I needed a new phone.
Is it like Nanny 911, or
it's
what is
crazy.
that called? Where the nanny comes in and fixes the situation.
And just like disses them the whole time and tells them what morons they are. This guy is exactly that. So he's kind of hilarious. But
so you've listened to it?
Oh yeah, I've watched a few of them.
It's okay.
Because they're just quick, like Instagram reels.
Got it.
Yeah.
I was thinking podcast again.
Yeah, no, not podcast. He maybe does have a podcast. I don't even know this guy's name, but he's hilarious. So anyway, but money is, for us, like we're 26 years into our marriage. Money has been a consistent sticking point for us, has been something that we've never, at least for me, I speak for myself, never have been content with. I've felt a lot of shame around it. I've felt a lot of...
Isn't it funny, I'm thinking of it for myself too. It's like, I don't want to get too close to it. Like talk about money, or if I'm not close into it or whatever, then I can't make any mistakes around it. And
is that why you don't want to get close to it? Because
if I'm not making the decisions, then I don't have to be held responsible for any mistakes.
Yeah. Which, yeah.
Would you agree with that on me?
I would agree
or
with
about
that.
me.
I would say I didn't know that. I wouldn't have said that was the struggle that you had with it until you told me that about, I think even maybe about something else, but it makes a lot of sense. We've had, and we will, I think in the future we'll go into more of just what our story has been, because it's hard to talk about. Like and I've talked about this at our church a few times. Like there's a period in my life that there's like 4 to 6 years I just don't talk about, because I made a lot of mistakes. I was a Christian, and I believe I was saved, but I was not walking with Christ, and there was a lot of sin in my life. And part of that was dealing with money and just allowing us to make mistakes. And I, years later, like I came to like, yeah, you played a part in that too, but there was so much shame for it on my side. I always held you up as like, you didn't do anything wrong. I've done all of this. And looking back, as we've actually been able to talk about it, is no, we both played a part in it. And so, but man, it's really, really hard to talk about. So I do think in the future we'll get into more into that. But tonight we really wanted to focus on, boy, are you communicating about money? Are you having a conversation? Do both of you know your goals or where you're at? Like, do you know the balances in your checking account?
How often do you talk about money?
And if you don't, red flag. Like, it's maybe not a problem yet, but it will be if you never have conversation about it. That's the enemy's just smart. He isolates us and gets us in our own world, and it's easy for us to make mistakes. And so yeah, tonight's more about like, how do you have the conversation?
So how do we have the conversation? Like, how do we? Like now it's different because I feel like we have more like not dates, but like times planned of like, hey,
We tried that for a while.
Yeah, every Monday night. But I think we also like scheduled that because we had certain goals or certain things we really wanted to work on. And now I feel like we've gotten into some new routines and new habits that have been very helpful. And so we haven't had to necessarily meet every Monday, but I feel like maybe it's once a month. We'll check in, and maybe that is something do you ever like slip a little bit and then you're like, oh, we need to start having those dates again. But how, like when you look at our past, it's like, oh, how do you start the conversation?
So I think there's probably a couple things here. The first one, like I'll get to like how we do it, and you just kind of talked about it. Like we did start scheduling like specific times.
Because then you knew too, like what to, like the anticipation.
Yeah, you knew it was coming.
Yes, and it wasn't like you were, it's not like we came into it
and we both get defensive when it comes to money. Like I get defensive, I get super defensive.
I just said we didn't go into them defensive, but we still did.
Yeah, we've gotten better. Yeah, but we for sure. So, but for me it was, what did it take for us to actually start having the conversation? We're 26 years into our marriage, and 20 years in or whatever it was, I had to say, I need help with this because I've tried to manage our money. It is certainly not my skill set. I would say I'm more the spender than you. You're a saver. I don't spend on like, I'm not buying TVs and stuff like that, but if I had no governors in my life or no guardrails, I would buy my dinner and lunch every day. Like, and I did that for a long time, like Culver's, Chick-fil-A, like.
And I'd be packing my lunch, going to school, going, how come I have a peanut butter jelly and you get to go out to eat all the time?
And I think in my brain, I'm like, I'm an adult, I can spend my money. And then, yeah, adults can spend their money and also make terrible decisions. So yeah, I'm an adult that messed it up. So I just think for me, I got to a spot where it was dire enough for me to ask for help. So that started the conversation, but I had to be okay with knowing it was going to be conflict and knowing it was going to be awkward. And so I went in knowing that, but it was like, I wouldn't say rock bottom, but it was just like, rock bottom was another time financially for us, not when we really started communicating better. But there had to be enough motivation for me to start the conversation.
Yeah. And I would say you being willing to start it was like, it put value in me too, saying, hey, I want to do this with you. And like, I think you have something to offer, which I feel like has helped build my confidence too.
And I don't really even understand why you don't feel confident in it, because I might understand like how money works or how like finances or investments and stuff, like I might understand the definitions, but you're better at it. And so like you do it, but mostly because you just don't spend any. You're just like, well, I'm just not going to spend anything and I'm going to grit my teeth and get through it. And so I always thought you had something to offer. I just thought, for me, again, it was there's a lot of shame around it, and I thought, I'm just going to bring Andrew so much stress. I don't want to bring it up. But it just got to the point where I'm like, we have to figure out a different way.
So how are we doing now?
We're doing better. We're doing better. I actually, coming up in about a month and a half, will be 2 years of when kind of we really started on a new path of having conversation and doing some things and being really specific with eliminating debt and some different things like that. And so I always think it's interesting because we go from 1 month to the next month and it doesn't feel like we've made any headway. But if you look from 2 years ago to today, it's kind of remarkable. And so God's been really, really faithful. It's been really, really hard. It's still hard. Like, you get fully out of debt, and then now I've got a medical bill that we've got to pay. And so, so it always, like, we often joke about that. It's like, well, there's always something that keeps coming up, and that can get frustrating. But if you take a step back and you look where we were 2 years ago to today, like, we're in a
But
much
also,
better
I think
place.
our trust in God's provision has also grown, and I think He's allowed these seasons to remind us of what's important.
Yeah, He's never not provided. Even in the most dire of circumstances, He's never not provided. How do you think we're doing?
I think we're in a much healthier spot of being able to have conversation. I think the more frequent the conversations you have around money and your finances, the more comfortable you also become talking about it, and then even talking about frustrations with it, or it's just not as awkward. So I feel like we're in a much healthier spot, and now it's even just, again, like, I feel like you can easily slip in those areas. So how do we stay ahead of the game instead of finding ourselves in a position of like, oh shoot, like.
And we have, like, I also want to say, like, we've done some things right too. As we look at, like, retirement, like, our retirement's in a really good place compared to the national average, like a really, really good place. And so there's a ton of things that we haven't done right as far as spending and different things and going into some debt. But that's one thing with our saving for retirement. We have never really stopped that. There was even a point where we had to borrow from that, and that was 15 years ago, maybe more now. Gosh, we're getting old. But we paid all that back, and it was the best thing that we did, because that's really been our main nest egg. So it's not like we've done everything wrong. Talking about it has, especially in the last 2 years, it has gotten easier, and we have put some things in place where we're just like, we listen to a few podcasts around finance and Christian finance. Our favorite one is called the Seed Time Money podcast with Bob and Linda Loddick, and we'll put the info for you guys to find that. Just so good. Similar to, like, I think Dave Ramsey has a lot of good things to say too, and he's a financial guru for a reason. The Loddicks, maybe Dave Ramsey can be a little bit like, oh, you spent too much? You're a moron. And the Loddicks are a little bit more.
He doesn't say it, but maybe that's how you read it.
Yeah.
Or does he say it?
Oh, Dave Ramsey?
Yeah.
Oh, he calls everybody a moron.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
He's like, why do you need that car? You're a moron. Quit spending so much. And you need that tough love. I do like the Seed Time Money podcast. They really get to the heart of, hey, get control of your spending. Are you doing these things? Like, where's your heart?
They just teach you how to look at money differently, and that's where I feel like it'd be just good to have another conversation around just how you perceive money, and as a Christian, like, what God's calling us to do, and
what's the purpose
of it. Yeah.
And so that's been really helpful. We've tried a number of different ways to, like, manage, like, a budget, and we could talk about that in a future one too, but that's been like kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're like, I think this works. Let's try this. And so,
but willing to try.
But we've at least been trying.
Willing to try different things.
So that's been good. I guess my one thing for people would be, you have to talk about it. Step into the difficult. Step into the hard. Is there anything you would tell people that have a tough time?
No, I mean, I would agree with that, and don't worry about where it's going to lead. I feel like anything, you bring things to the light and it brings you closer together as a couple, but it also might reveal some things where it's like, oh yeah, like look at what where we're going with this and celebrate it, but also maybe there's some areas where you're like, yeah, what could it look like? What could this area of our life look different, or how could it be more beneficial?
Yeah.
So
a couple of things maybe to leave you with. 1 Timothy 6 verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. I think people have heard this, a lot of people have heard this verse, but they hear it, you hear it quoted as money's the root of all evil, which isn't true. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
So it's not the actual money itself, it's the position of your heart.
Yeah, which is what Jesus is always after, is your heart. And so that's always where he's gonna go after. Like he would rather give us his heart than modify our behavior, because modifying our behavior isn't always going to change your heart. But if your heart changes, that's going to modify your behavior. So I'll leave you with that. And then, and this is what I really thought about this in...
You've been sharing this with the girls.
Yeah,
anyone you come across, you are sharing this quote.
I was from 2 weeks ago, I heard this from John Eldridge's podcast, Wild at Heart. And they weren't talking about money, they were talking about like world events. And I just thought it was so good. He said, to mature as a human being is to accept reality. And then he said, God, by the way, is the greatest reality. I think with finances, people don't accept reality. And that's what I did for years. I just buried my head in the sand. I didn't accept reality. I didn't accept the decisions I was making had consequences, and we were going to have to deal with that reality at some point. It's like, no, just get another credit card or do this. And so I just think that's so, so important. So if like having a conversation with your spouse is really hard, I would say to mature as a human being is to accept reality. Like you still have to have
and
that
face
conversation.
it. Yeah.
Just get into it, because at some point it's going to come. You might as well have it earlier rather than later.
Have it around a bowl of ice cream or something.
Yeah, or green tea to activate your immunity.
Chamomile? How do you say chamomile?
Chamomile. I don't think that's right.
Chamomile tea.
All right, thanks for stopping by.
Yes.
That's our new sign off. And thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for stopping by.